Hooked on Health podcast. In this podcast, you can find expert tips for the discerning listener on aging, how to live longer and healthier, how nutrition and pharmacy plays a role in your wellness, and much more. This is Hooked on Health with Dr. Sean Lorden.
Well, hello and welcome to the Hooked on Health podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sean Lorden. Today, I'm here with Jeff Meyer,
right,
of Alpha Flow Athletics, and we'll just, Jeff, let you take from here and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I was a basketball coach for about 30 years. I coached at different high schools and then at University of Northern Colorado and at Colorado State University. And I got my degree, my bachelor's degree is in social psychological kinesiology. And then I got my master's degree in pedagogy with an emphasis in sports psychology. Well, about 11 years ago, when I was coaching, I really realized it's like, man, these kids are so physically gifted. But if they break down mentally, it doesn't matter how gifted you are, you know? And so 10 years ago, with the blessing of my wonderful wife, I quit a job and started this company called Alpha Flow Athletics. And basically what I do is I train elite athletes on the mental side of what they do. I just realized at the time that it's like, man, if you don't, if mentally you're not handling it, it doesn't matter how gifted you are physically, And it kind of started back when I was in high school. I remember we were playing, I played basketball in high school. We were playing a team that was, 6 miles away. So it was a big time, game. And long story short, I got fouled with 4 seconds left on the clock. And I got up to the line. I could really shoot. I got up to the line, hit the first one. Then the opposing coach called the timeout. And we went to the bench. And my coach says, okay, when Jeff makes this is what we're going to do. And then he said, if he misses this, now the only word I heard was miss. And so I counted, it was 38 steps to walk back from the bench to the foul line. And man, everything just attacked me then. It was crazy because I could really shoot. I had a pretty good shot. So I was confident on the first one, wasn't thinking about it. And then when I was walking back out, I realized that all this is like this cute girl in the stands. It's like if I choke in front of her, like my team, my coach, all the fans, it was a sold out crowd. So, and I just remember getting up to the foul line. There's this thing that when I work with athletes, they're called ants, automatic negative thoughts. And they hit you at the worst time. And it's not just athletes, it's anybody preparing for something big. But I remember getting up to the foul line and just as I was holding the ball, I felt my hand go like that. I mean, it completely took over my body. Luckily, I hit the rim. I missed the shot, but at least I hit the rim. But we ended up losing by a point. And that really started the whole, probably the last 40 years. Just that from there, I realized it's like, man, nobody had ever trained me for that. I had never gone through anything like that before. And come to find out, everybody deals with it at some time, but most people don't know how to deal with it. And so it's kind of why I started my company. And that's a little taste of what I do.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. The mental game, I can speak as a golfer is, very challenging as a golfer. And, I'd love to get into kind of some of those strategies that you use. But first, what is the core mission of Alpha Flow Athletics?
Well, if you really look at it, I just want I want athletes to realize that the mental game has to be trained like a skill development or like lifting weights. And that's probably the hardest part that I have to deal with, because athletes, they'll come in, they're struggling with something, and we kind of get them on the right path, and then they go back, right? They don't keep training. And so that's one thing. But I think one thing is just having athletes understand that if the mind and the body work together, that's peak performance. I mean, that's and I've studied a lot about flow and flow state, how to get in it and things like that. And flow state is, simply put, when you perform your best and you feel your best. And you as a doctor, anybody can get into flow. It's not an athlete. I've worked with a heart surgeon before. I mean, it's crazy, government agencies, things like that, that I never thought. I thought I was just going to be, working with athletes. But getting into flow, I think, and it makes your life fuller. You enjoy your job or whatever you're doing more. So that's kind of where I'm at, getting into those, having athletes and other people get into those flow states where they perform their best and they feel their best.
Now, what are some of the strategies that some of the beginner strategies that you would share, with my audience, to, either qualities that they have and that they can train, but maybe 2 or 3 strategies they can use to kind of get on the right path to be able to get into a flow state?
Yeah, and so I don't know. Do you know Stephen Kotler? Have you heard of Stephen Kotler?
I haven't.
He's kind of the flow godfather right now. Before him, there was a guy. He was a professor at University of Chicago. His name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which is, he's Hungarian, but he had the biggest study. He's written several books on flow. But one thing that they have found out, that it's really trainable. You can open up, certain things that can get you into this state quicker. And one of the things that I, probably could start with your audience is, it's not like an on and off switch. It goes through phases. And the first phase that I try to teach athletes is struggle. And the thing that's hard is that most people back away from that. It's not something they want to do, and it can be physical struggle, emotional struggle, mental struggle. It doesn't have to be just always grinding, gritting it out. But, and I just wrote a book, and I finally, within my book, I was doing a little bit talking about it. But one of the things that when I was doing the research for my book, I really realized, it's like, wow, we're raising a generation of kids now that, man, being able to focus with our phones is brutal. I mean, it is, and they've got really smart guys trying to figure out ways to keep us on there. And if you're in that first phase of struggle, but you can't focus, then you're distracted and you don't no longer struggle. So you have to stay in that struggle phase a little bit, and the next phase is just, it's release, is what it does. You release into flow state. And so that struggle is really important. But if we have, kids that can't sit still, can't, I've read so much about a cell phone for the last probably year and a half. And I'm like, man, if I can give anybody great advice, it would be, and it's going to be really hard, but it would be, have your kids, man, luckily my kids are old enough where I didn't have to deal with it, because it's a nightmare. But I would say I wouldn't let my kids, and I don't know how I would do it, but I would really try 16 at least. 16. I read a little study where a neuroscientist did his own little study, and he said, if a 6th grader uses his phone or her phone right now like they do, and they kept that pace, by the time they're 35, they will have spent almost 9 years of their life on the phone. And
Incredible.
I
And when you tie that back to focus, right? So they've got a struggle, right? And maybe part of the struggle is just getting attention to what, the task at hand is, shooting a basketball. I'd love to hear like a sports analogy of somebody, Jeff, that you were able to kind of bring through each of the phases.
Yeah, so I have, and that's been the one of the coolest things about my job is when you see the mental piece starting to click together, then you see things really happening. One example, I had a really good swimmer that I was working with, and she just felt like she couldn't go any faster. It's just like she had reached certain times and PR'd, and it's like, so we really started training the mental piece and being it with this struggle phase. One of the things that I was trying to teach her is like, look, the race doesn't start until you start feeling that pain, because everybody feels good at first. It's like, now how do you deal with the pain? And I taught her, it's like, this is that struggle phase, right? You're really struggling and you can break through that. But most athletes, they back away from it just a little bit. We would never probably notice, but they know. It's like they back away from it just a little bit. And so one of the things that I was really trying to, it's like, you gotta, when you feel that pain, try to speed up and just see what happens. And so I started working with her, and at back, it comes to that focus. It comes to, can I stay in this long enough without being distracted with, the way I feel or my thoughts, those ants automatic, all that kind of stuff. There's so much involved. But
what are some of the other distractions that kind of, happen other than the ants? I like that acronym.
Yeah. So, our self-talk is huge. We kind of listen to, and then we start repeating it ourselves. And that also, is huge. Other distraction, internal, but then there's external. It could be like when I was shooting my foul shot, I saw that cute girl. That was a huge distraction, right? So the internal and external, those are, some of the things. And then just, I think, when you're looking at distant type sports, being able to deal with pain in a different way, than most people, most swimmers. And anyway, from 1 month, we worked together for 1 month, or I remember getting a text, and she took first place and it dropped 15 seconds on her time. Now she's a distant athlete, but 15 seconds is a lot. And she finally realized, it's like, I've never used my mind to make me better.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
So,
now, talk to me about, well, I'd love to hear a golfing analogy. I don't know if you work with any golfers, but personally, I'm a golfer and I'm really interested in that kind of analogy. But, I'm also interested in how we can incorporate sort of, the average everyday, human, how they can get to a flow state in their daily lives.
yeah, and that's where my company is really blossomed because of that. I mean, I still work with athletes every day, but I've had opportunities, like I said, to work with government agencies and stuff like that, and that's what they're interested in, right? It's like, how do I get? So McKinsey did a big study, and they found out that the average worker gets 11 minutes of deep work done a day. 11 minutes. They said within that 11 minutes, it's costing our economy like $6 billion because of the lack of focus at the workplace. We're just always distracted. And so one of the, if you go back to that struggle phase, just sitting still and don't multitask, that kills you're always being distracted if you're multitasking. There's a thing called focus fragmentation, and when you think you just got done with something, now you're over here, but part of your brain is still fragmented over there, so you're not completely present ever. And so it's like, how do we get to so that we're present when we're doing stuff? You know, when I have just a couple employees, but my goal is like, hey man, we got to get more than 11 minutes of deep work done every day, you know, for us to be really successful. And so that could be the struggle piece for some people. It's like, just set a task. um, you know, you use different principles. So I usually use a clock or a watch. I actually have this on my, it's a little timer. And what I'll do is I'll set that. I'll say, okay, this should take 15 minutes. I set the timer and I drill. It's like nothing else is present. I try to get it done in that 15 minutes, which helps me really get into the focus. And then the struggle piece of it, I like when I was writing my book, and I'm not it. I mean, I did extra credit to get a D in English. So it was a struggle for me. But when I was writing that, there were days where it's like I wrote for like 14 hours. I mean, it was like it just kept coming, you know. And so, but I struggled before. It's like struggle, and then finally kicked in.
Yeah, I think, at least personally, I definitely can relate to the focus fragmentation piece. But I think, having written a book, myself, I think the first 20 minutes are the hardest minutes to get through. And then after that, it's like I could write for 2 hours. Talk to me about what is that struggle piece that you're talking about?
Yeah. And so there's ways that you can maybe, so when I started really studying this, I've taken Stephen Kotler. You know, he has a huge course that you can, and I've taken that to help my athletes, but it's really turned into helping a whole bunch of other things. I mean, and this is crazy. I actually work with I have a partnership with a mom, and we have a website that's called grittymamas.com, and it's teaching these same skills to moms, which that's not something that I never thought I would do either. But, it affects everybody. But I think that struggle piece, one thing that I started doing when I was writing, I would wake up, I try to get up about 4 o'clock. I wake up 4 o'clock. I would come into my office, all the lights off, and I would just hit the computer screen. That's the only thing that's on. I can't see anything else. And then you're right. The struggle, it's like, gosh, and sometimes you just feel like, it's like, it was hard for me.
So the Gritty Mamas thing is really interesting, Jeff. Tell me a little bit more about that. What are a couple strategies I'm sure my wife will listen to this. What are some of the strategies that you give to, mothers of young kids?
It's kind of a weird little deal. I was working with a gymnast and the mom was listening, and she goes, I need this more than my kids do, and that's kind of how it all came to be. But one of the things that moms are notorious for doing is multitasking. And, you're just building your brain to be distracted is basically what you're kind of doing. So, if you can really, now I get it when it's kind of brain dead stuff, like when you're folding your clothes and I don't know, doing something else, kind of in between. But if you can build your brain so that it's like you focus on one thing and you just get it done, then you take it something else, focus on another thing. It builds a strength in your brain that you normally don't have, especially with moms, because they are self-proclaimed multitaskers.
I've heard before that women are better multitaskers than men. Like scientifically proven that that's a thing. Is that anything that's come up in your research?
So, not that I now I think they're better at it because they do it way more. But it's still kind of messing with your brain a little, that back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so, but other things that we've done is, just have, so with every athlete, but with the Gritty Mamas, I have moms every morning just hit the cold, right? They hit cold shower, they hit, ice. It's great for your body. We know stuff like that, but I'm looking at it as the mental piece. It's like, can you really, it sounds easy, until you get in really cold water, then it becomes not so easy. So it's a mental thing. It's like, do I have the mental fortitude for the next 30 days to get in a cold shower when I don't want to? And if you look on the grittymamas.com, it tells the story of Julie, who's the other mom, and she has a little video, and she actually just recorded her a song. She wrote a song, and it's called Gritty Mamas. And in the video, they went out, uh, chipped ice, and they all got in, some really cold water, which is it's a pretty cool little thing. But mom's, she just is. She told me, she goes, Jeff, you don't understand how the depression and motherhood, it's so intertwined, and there's so many moms out there suffering. And so that's kind of what we were looking. It's like, maybe we can help them in this way to train the mental piece.
And so I just want to dig in on, the cold shower piece, in the morning. And that's, I guess, would be like the first, struggle decision that,
Yeah.
that somebody, that you would actually make that decision. Talk to me more about that philosophy behind that and what the next steps are after, taking a
Yeah. So I look at it as, um, to get anything accomplished, you're going to run up against hard stuff. It's just, that's our life. And so I'm trying to get them to get in a space where they like challenge, right? It's like, this is now, like I said, if you think about it, it's really simple. Just get in cold water. But man, when you really do it, I've done it for, probably the last 6 or 7 years, and I'm pretty good. I'm not 100%. There are days where like, not going to happen today.
Now, how long will you last?
So I go about 6 minutes,
Okay.
enough. But I built up to that. The first time I did it, I remember I was like, man, I haven't had my heart beat like that for a long time. It's like, oh, takes your breath away. But the mental piece of it is just like, I try to teach athletes and everybody I work with, you have to develop a relationship with discomfort. If I tell athletes all the time, look, if you're going to practice and you don't feel this discomfort, you're not growing. And it's not always physical stuff. It could be mental, developing a skill. I remember when I was working on my left hand as a basketball player, it got so frustrating sometimes because my right hand, it was so easy. But my left hand, it took a long time for me to get confident. And that's that struggle. Learn to struggle in our lives. If we would learn to struggle more, it gets us into flow more. But most people, they don't ever want to even. Our goal in our society now is like, yeah, just give me the retirement. And then I just want to lay back you know,
Now,
and
let's
so,
go back to golfers. So when you say that struggle, right? So, for me, it's hitting that flush shot, right? And then repeating that flush shot. That to me is flow for me. The struggle is when I hit, when I go to the range before the session and I hit 10 slices and I'm like, oh man, what's the first tee shot going to look like? Because I can't rotate. I didn't stretch. I didn't, get enough sleep or whatever the night before. So walk me through kind of what that stages of a golfer's brain look like.
so I don't know. I just have you ever read the book, The Inner Game of Golf?
I don't think I have.
There's one anyway. Um, but one of the things that you know, I think sometimes we overthink everything. And I've worked with a lot of golfers, and one thing that we try to do is like, just go hit. Don't analyze anything. Just hit. Just swing. Swing. Don't think about it, because we start thinking about it, and then it's endless, right? You go from here to here to here to here. You could spend hours just analyzing. And so one of the things, I worked with a kid that was a golfer at CU, and really good. And he was struggling with kind of shaking a little bit. same thing as shooting a foul shot, being aware of our thoughts is really, really important for all of us, those ants when they come in, because the thing we don't really realize is that when we think this way, and you release chemicals in your body that make you feel that way, and I'm like, why would we ever do that? Why would, we always think the most negative thing that can happen, and it's like, oh, here I go again, the slice, or
Don't hit it right, don't hit it right, don't hit it right, and then it just goes right, directly where you're thinking,
yeah,
but the other piece that's really interesting to me too about golf and probably about other sports as well, is that, a lot of the advice from, seasoned vets is picture the shot in your mind before you hit it and where it's going to end up and what the shot shape is going to be. Is that sort of some advice like along the lines of the flow state that you give?
Yeah, I have golfer, well, I have everybody. Visualization is such an important piece. I mean, it's training your brain. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, I can't remember, it wasn't Tiger, but it was somebody, but he said, I close my eyes and visualize every shot. Every shot, I close my eyes and I think to myself where it's going to land. And so visualization is training without the physical part of it, and I teach athletes, it's called that you understand more, I think, when you sit and you visualize, sometimes by trying to be in the middle of it, and so Dr. Sean, if if I would say, what if before you went out, and it's hard, if you're hitting 18, it's hard to figure out how, but I there's a really cool story about a bobsledder, and Olympic bobsledder. He went to, and I can't remember where it was at, but he went to where the Olympics were going to be, and he took pictures of the track, and he came home, printed them off, and put them out throughout his house. And he visualized, he'd look at that piece of the track, close his eyes, and just see it, right? And I think one thing that we don't do very well is we don't teach athletes to feel. And, your brain records it better when there's a feeling, when there's something. And so he
and usually it's a mad feeling when you miss a shot.
But he said he got to where he could see like little chips in the paint of that track. He could close his eyes and know exactly, and he ended up winning the gold medal.
That's really cool.
He's like, I knew that track like crazy, and visualization, I always tell people, it's like, man, why not get mental reps? It's like, you could get over a year 10,000 more reps than your competitor. Don't you think that would help?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about it like that. If you're thinking about, taking that free throw shot, or taking that 3-pointer, or throwing that touchdown pass, or, hitting a flush 7-iron, and what that feels like and what that looks like and where it's going to end, that's an interesting, you don't think about practicing that way and like a blocked.
Yeah, you think you got to be out there grinding, that's kind of our mentality, right? We got to grind, that. And when I talk to football coaches, especially, they start perking up. I'm like, what if we, throughout the whole year, you cut back 10 minutes of time where I taught them to visualize. I call it's polysensory visualization. It's just bringing all your senses in to your visualization. And I said 15 minutes each practice, because it's so funny in sports, when we're supposed to perform our very best is at the end of the season, and that's when our body feels the very worst.
Yeah.
You look at football players and they're barely hobbling around, and with injection, stuff like that. But I look at it and I'm thinking, what if you could take, 200 less hits in a season? Wouldn't that help at the end of the season when they need to perform their very best? And coaches are like, I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, I think that's really a key point, for our audience is, reps can happen in your brain too. And I don't think anybody really thinks about that, Jeff.
Yeah.
So Jeff is an author. He wrote the book Victory Begins in the Mind.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'd love for you to share just, 2 or 3 key insights from your book that you feel as though are the most impactful.
I think by far it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Where there's a chapter about phone use, and I hate to keep preaching, but it just blew me away. I mean, it is gonna. A neuroscientist. I was at a conference and they were talking about, because I'm still trying to study for the book, and he says if I was an evil dictator, I'd have everybody staring at their phone because I could guide them anywhere I want them to go. And I thought about that and I was like, man. And so I work with, a lot of youth, and I tell athletes all the time, is the phone stealing your talent? With a lot of kids, it's going to be a real struggle to be able just to put your phone down and away.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would really, have parents, athletes. It's like, man, and I understand, you're trying to build your brand and, you're trying to do all that stuff, but you have to get to a point where you have power over it instead of, they said medium type users could touch their cell phone up to 600 times in a day. How are you
incredible
focused? You're not, and so that's one thing. And then I just think we just don't look, and it's kind of a paradigm shift is what I'm trying to get people to understand. We like the mental reps, right? We just don't look at mental training the same way we would look at physical training, at lifting weights, developing skill. It's like, I tell athletes, all the time, they'll say, I'll have them do something. I say, do you do it this week? And they're like, oh man, I was so busy. I didn't get, and I said, how many times did you lift this week? Oh, they didn't miss a day. So that's where my battle is to begin to say, hey, why don't we train the brain like we would your body, lifting weights?
And I think it'll be helpful for our audience, Jeff, if you can kind of send me some of those articles, and I'll link them in the show notes.
Okay.
Because I know for the the geekier parts of our audience, I'm sure they'll love to read a little bit more about the cell phone use and the mental training pieces.
And I had one kid, phenomenal athlete. Great. He had almost a 50-inch vertical jump. He's like 3% body fat, 6'6". I wanted his. I was like, why can't I be you? But he texted me one day and he goes, I'm really struggling in classes. And I'm like, what's going on? And he goes, let's talk tonight. So I talked to him about 9 o'clock that night. And when I work with athletes, it's like, you tell me the truth and I tell you the truth. That's the way we work, And so I said, first thing I said, pull out your phone. And he did not want to do it. And I go, you know how to do it. Tell me how much time. And he spent almost 11 hours. And he does his classes. He's a great student, but it started to catch up with him, right? He's going to classes. He didn't miss any classes, training table, study, all that stuff, workouts, lifting, practice, all that. He still did all that stuff. And I'm like, well, then it's cutting into your sleep for sure, which is, the flip side of you training. You can go work your tail off, but if you're not getting great sleep, it's not really helping it. And so realized this, and he told me this is one thing that really hit me. He goes, I feel numb.
That's sad. That's tough. Talk to me a little bit, Jeff, and I'm sure, and if it's not in your book, I'd love to hear your feelings on it. Talk to me about the positive attitude, the visual, the sort of the, I feel like this is all over Instagram, but that visualization piece and the things that you see in your mind coming to fruition. I'd love to, we get like 2 or 3 more minutes, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things, just start off I remember my dad was a coach, and I remember him telling me when I was playing, now he wasn't my coach. He coached on a college level. This was when I was in high school, but he said, Jeff, if you knew the power of your thoughts, you would never think a negative thought again. And that he told me that probably 46 years ago, and it still sticks with me this day. It's like, why would you ever focus on a negative thing when you can think about it in a much positive, better way? And then when we find out those thoughts equal chemicals in our body that make us slower, weaker, mentally not as clear, why would we ever do that? And so I really chasing greatness. You don't do it by looking at all the. Now you have to be realistic. I think you got to know where your weaknesses are at, but you don't want to live in that. You want to be powerful. So we think, I have athletes think of power statements. One lady that I'm working with right now, she's a two-time champion American Ninja Warrior. She was the first one to win it as a mom. And she's like, I can't believe how this has helped me. The way I feed my brain before I go perform. It has just been a game changer because I was always unsure. Now, I don't know if it was, I was trying to pull negative stuff out, but it wasn't strong and positive, and I don't mean Pollyanna, like, you know, fluffy stuff. I'm like powerful statements that mean something to you. And she's like, it has changed the way I feel so much before I go perform.
That's incredible. What's an example of one of those powerful, positive statements?
She says, this is just her. I don't think she'll mind. Hi, Sandy. She said, I think one of her is, I was made for this.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And
that's incredible.
Any kind of weakness or negative thought, when I say that, it just fills my body with this, this power. Like I can just go out and just kill,
I love that. So just, we get an ending tradition. Favorite movie?
I just named to my kids. Can I give you three of them?
Sure.
Miracle, Hoosiers, and Rudy. They're all sports.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great mix right there. Favorite concert?
So I've seen both of them. Van Halen with David Lee Roth and Van Halen with Sammy Hagar.
I love that. And then the motto or quote that you live your life by.
I really think it's that one that my dad, it just keeps coming up every time I think about it. It's like, if you knew the power of your thoughts, you would never think a negative thought again. And man, if people could live just by thinking that way, our society would be a lot better.
Awesome. Jeff Meyer, everyone. Thanks so much, Jeff, for joining today. He's a nationally regarded mindset coach. And I'll have a bunch of links in the show notes. You can buy Jeff's book from the show notes. And thanks so much again, Jeff, for joining me.
Thank you. And it's been an honor. Thanks a lot for having me on. I'm excited.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. See ya.